Hi everyone, what would you do if your in-laws ignored you for years, and then you suddenly inherited a fortune? Hey, ignored my birthdays, skipped my hospital visits after miscarriages, and made me feel like an outsider in my own marriage. But everything changed the day my grandfather passed away, and left me $42 million. I'm Elena, and for almost a decade I was invisible to my husband's family. Then one phone call changed everything. Stick around because this story gets intense. This is my story. My name is Elena Voss, Elena Voss Harrington now, after 10 years of marriage to Mark. But for the longest 8 of those years, I was just Mark's wife to his family. The one who sat at the end of the table during Thanksgiving, nodding along while conversations flowed around me like I was a decorative centerpiece that didn't speak. The one whose birthday was forgotten more often than remembered. The one who was never invited to the family-only vacations in the Hamptons or the ski trips to Aspen. It started innocently enough, or so I told myself. Mark and I met in college, both studying business but dreaming bigger dreams. He was the golden boy from a wealthy East Coast family, old money, the kind that came with expectations, country club memberships, and a last name that opened doors. I was the scholarship kid from a modest background in the Midwest, raised by my single mother after my father passed away young. My grandfather, Papa Joe, was my rock. A self-made man who built a small manufacturing empire from nothing. He always told me, Lena, blood is blood, but character is everything. Mark's family didn't see it that way. His mother, Vivian Harrington, was the matriarch, elegant, sharp-tongued, and fiercely protective of the family image. From the first dinner I attended, she sized me up like a thrift store find that didn't quite match the silverware. So, Elena, she said, her pearls catching the light, what does your family do? When I mentioned my grandfather's factory and my mother's nursing job, the conversation shifted quickly to Mark's brother's latest promotion at the family investment firm. Mark's father, Richard, barely spoke to me beyond grunts of acknowledgement. His sister, Claire, was the worst, a socialite who treated me like an amusing pet project at first, then dropped the act entirely once it was clear I wasn't going to transform into some polished accessory for their world. You have to understand, Elena, she once whispered during a tense family brunch, we just want what's best for Mark. He's got a legacy to uphold. I tried. God, how I tried. I learned to set the table with the right forks, hosted dinners in our tiny starter apartment where I cooked recipes from Vivian's favorite chef, and bit my tongue when they forgot to include me in group photos. Mark noticed, of course. At first, he defended me. They're traditional, he'd say, kissing my forehead. Give them time. They'll come around. But time passed, and the defenses grew quieter. Work at his father's firm consumed him, and the excuses piled up, mom's stressed about the gala, or dad's dealing with board issues. Our marriage became a series of small compromises. I stopped pushing for invitations. He stopped noticing the hurt in my eyes. We moved into a nicer house in the suburbs after Mark's promotion, a gift from his parents, naturally, with strings attached. It's in a good school district, Vivian had said pointedly, eyeing my waist as if willing grandchildren into existence. But after 2 miscarriages and a diagnosis that made natural conception unlikely, even that dream faded. The family visits became rarer, the silence louder. During one particularly brutal Christmas, when I suggested we spend it with my mother for a change, Vivian laughed, a light, tinkling sound that cut like glass. Oh, darling, family traditions matter. Yours can visit here next year. My mother never got that invitation. I threw myself into work instead. I had built a career in nonprofit fundraising, helping small charities with donor relations. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Papa Joe was proud. He'd call every Sunday, his voice gravelly from years of factory floors. "How's that husband treating you, kiddo? And those in-laws? Still acting like you're the help?" I'd laugh it off, but he saw through it. "Remember, Lena, you've got steel in your spine. Don't let them dull it." Papa Joe's health had been declining for years, heart issues, diabetes, the toll of a lifetime of hard work. I visited him as often as I could, driving the 6 hours to his modest home in Ohio, where the walls were lined with photos of my grandmother and me as a child. Mark came once or twice early on, but work conflicts kept him away after that. "Your grandpa's great," he'd say, "but the firm's in the middle of a merger." I stopped asking. The call came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was in my office, reviewing grant proposals, when my phone rang. It was my mother, her voice trembling. "Lena, honey. Papa Joe's gone. He passed peacefully in his sleep." The world tilted. I drove through the night, arriving at the hospital just in time to say goodbye to a still form that no longer held the man who'd raised me with stories of grit and second chances. The funeral was small, just family and a few old workers from the factory. Mark sent flowers and called, promising to fly out the next day. He didn't make it, another emergency meeting. Vivian texted a generic condolence, "So sorry for your loss, dear." No call. No visit. Sorting through Papa Joe's things took weeks. His lawyer, Mr. Abernathy, an old friend with a kind face and wire-rimmed glasses, met me at the house. "Your grandfather was very clear in his will, Elena. He left everything to you." Everything. The factory, which had been quietly sold years ago for a substantial sum as Papa Joe planned his retirement. The investments he'd nurtured. The house. Savings. It totaled just over $42 million, liquid and ready. "He wanted you to have freedom," Mr. Abernathy said, sliding papers across the worn oak table. "No trusts, no conditions. He said you'd know what to do with it." I sat there, stunned, tears streaming down my face. 42 million. Enough to change lives. Enough to silence doubts. Enough to make the Harringtons notice. I didn't tell Mark right away. Something held me back, a quiet voice that sounded a lot like Papa Joe's. "Watch what they do when they know." I transferred a portion to our joint account, enough to pay off the house and surprise him with a vacation, but kept the bulk in my name. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of power. Not revenge, exactly. Just clarity. The first knock came 3 weeks later. I was at home, sipping coffee on the back porch, when my phone buzzed with a call from Claire. "Elena. Oh my God, I just heard about your grandfather. I'm so sorry we couldn't make the funeral. James had that conference in London. How are you holding up?" I almost laughed. "They heard?" Mark must have mentioned it casually. "I'm managing," I said evenly. "Thank you for the flowers. We should get together soon. The kids miss their Aunt Elena." She had never called me that before. Her children, spoiled twins aged 8, barely remembered my name most holidays. The next day, Vivian called. Her voice was all honey and concern. "Darling, Richard and I were devastated to hear. Why didn't you say something sooner? We would have been there in a heartbeat. Come to dinner this weekend. Mark can bring you. It's been too long since we've had a proper family meal." I agreed, mostly out of curiosity. Mark was thrilled when I told him. "See? They're trying. This means a lot to me, babe. He kissed me that night with more passion than I'd felt in months, as if my grief had finally earned me entry. Dinner at the Harrington estate was the usual affair: crystal glasses, linen napkins, conversations about stocks and scandals. But there was a new undercurrent. Vivian's eyes lingered on me longer. "Elena, dear, you look radiant, despite everything. Have you thought about what you'll do now? With your grandfather's estate, I mean." Mark mentioned it was quite substantial. Quite substantial. Understatement of the decade. I smiled politely. "I'm figuring it out. Papa Joe left me in a good position." Richard leaned forward, his businessman instincts kicking in. "If you need advice on investments, our firm can handle it. Family rates, of course." Claire chimed in, her husband nodding along. "And the kids would love a trip somewhere warm. Maybe we could all go? Celebrate your new chapter." Mark squeezed my hand under the table, beaming. For him, this was victory, his wife finally accepted. For me, it was the beginning of seeing the script. Over the next month, the knocks multiplied. Gifts arrived: a designer handbag from Vivian, to cheer you up, golf clubs for Mark from Richard, thought you two could use some couple time on the green, even a custom family portrait session from Claire. Subtle questions peppered every conversation. How liquid is the inheritance, exactly? Any plans for the factory assets? We should talk about trusts for future children, Mark's legacy, you know. I played along at first, vague and gracious. Inside, I was documenting it all. The ignored birthdays, the miscarriages where only my mother showed up at the hospital, the vacations where I stayed home holding down the fort. Mark was oblivious, happier than he'd been in years. "They're finally seeing you, Elena. This is what I've always wanted." But one evening, as I reviewed bank statements in our home office, Mark walked in. "Hey, I saw a large transfer from your account. Everything okay?" I looked up at him, the man I loved, yet the one who'd let me fade into the background for so long. "Just handling Papa Joe's estate." "Why?" He shrugged. "Mom asked if we needed help managing it. I told her you'd probably want the firm's input." "The firm's input?" "His family's firm." I nodded, but that night I lay awake, Papa Joe's words echoing. Character is everything. The real shift happened when I made my first big move. I donated $2 million anonymously to the hospital where Papa Joe spent his last days, earmarked for cardiac research. Then another $1 million to my old college scholarship fund. News of a mysterious benefactor hit local papers. Suddenly, my phone was ringing off the hook. Vivian was first. "Elena, is this true? About the donations? We had no idea you were in a position to, well, do that sort of thing." I kept my voice light. "Papa Joe believed in giving back. I'm just honoring that." Richard followed up with a lunch invitation, just us men, but somehow including me. Over steak, he pitched joining the family business board. "Your resources could be transformative for Harrington Investments." Claire wanted a girls' day at the spa, where she gushed about how inspiring I was and casually mentioned her husband's struggling startup. A small investment could change everything for them. Family helping family. Even distant cousins and in-laws I'd never met started checking in. Social media flooded with friend requests and old photos tagged with #FamilyFirst. Mark noticed the change in me. "You've been distant lately. Is it the grief?" I turned to him in our bed one night, the moonlight casting shadows on his familiar face. It's not just grief, Mark. It's perspective. For years, I was invisible to them. Now money makes me visible. What does that say? He sighed, pulling me close. They're not perfect, but they're trying now. Can't you meet them halfway? Halfway. After years of full sprints in the other direction, I started making plans quietly. Hired my own financial advisor, independent of the Harringtons. Visited my mother and took her on a cruise, first class, no expenses spared. She cried when I told her the amount. Papa Joe always knew you'd do right by it. The family grew bolder. Vivian invited me to the annual Harrington Gala as the guest of honor. I attended in a gown that cost more than my first car, Mark beaming at my side. Whispers followed me, that's the one who inherited. Mark hit the jackpot. During the cocktail hour, Richard cornered me. Elena, let's talk seriously. With your capital, we could expand the firm internationally. Mark's ready for a bigger role. It would secure everything for the next generation. I sipped my champagne. And what if I have other plans? He chuckled, but his eyes were cold. Family sticks together. Especially now. That was the moment the cracks widened. I smiled, but inside, steel forged. Papa Joe's fortune wasn't just money, it was a mirror. And the Harringtons didn't like what they saw in it. The first real confrontation came a few days later. Claire showed up unannounced at our house, her face flushed. Elena, we need to talk. My husband's deal fell through. He needs bridge funding, $200,000. It's nothing for you now. Please. I invited her in, poured tea. Claire, do you remember my 30th birthday? When you and Vivian went to Paris instead of coming to the small party I planned? She blinked. That was years ago. Water under the bridge. Or the hospital after my second miscarriage? When Mark had to leave early for a family emergency that turned out to be your shopping trip. Her cheeks reddened. You're holding grudges? After everything we've done for you? Done for me? I laughed softly. Ignored me. Tolerated me. Now you want my money. She stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. Mark will hear about this. He did. That night, our argument was the loudest our house had ever seen. Their family, Elena. Your family too. Why can't you forgive? Because forgiveness without change is just permission to repeat the hurt, I said, tears hot on my face. I love you, Mark. But I won't be erased anymore. He slept in the guest room. For the first time, the silence between us felt like a choice. Word spread quickly in the family circle. Invitations slowed, but the pressure didn't. Subtle digs in group chats, concerned calls from Richard about protecting Mark's interests. Even Mark's attitude shifted, he started talking about our money more often, as if the inheritance had rewritten our vows. I spent long hours reflecting, walking the trails near our house, thinking of Papa Joe. He hadn't left me money to buy love. He'd left it to buy freedom. To choose my circle. To build something real. The first part of my plan solidified. I set up a foundation in his name, focusing on education for underprivileged kids, scholarships, factory apprenticeships, the kind of opportunities he'd created for others. I poured $5 million into it initially, with more to come. The announcement made the papers again. This time, I attached my name. The knocks turned frantic. Vivian arrived one afternoon, uncharacteristically disheveled. Elena, this has gone too far. You're alienating everyone. Think of Mark. Think of your future children, if you pursue that surrogate idea you mentioned. I had mentioned it once, casually, as a hope. Now it was ammunition. Actually, I said, I'm thinking clearly for the first time. And my future doesn't require your approval anymore. She left in tears, real ones, perhaps. Or practiced. It didn't matter. Mark and I entered counseling. He listened, somewhat. I didn't see how bad it was for you. I was blind, caught up in their world. Progress, but fragile. Love doesn't vanish overnight, but trust? That takes work. As summer turned to fall, the family adapted their strategy. They invited my mother to events, too little, too late. They praised my foundation publicly while privately calling it showy. But the doors that had slammed shut for years were now ajar, waiting for me to step through on their terms. I didn't. Instead, I bought a small cottage near my mother's town, a place for quiet weekends. I traveled alone to Italy, tracing paths Papa Joe had dreamed of but never taken. Postcards went to Mark, not the family. The story wasn't over. The knocks continued, each one revealing more about who they were, and who I was becoming. A woman no longer invisible. A woman with Papa Joe's steel, and now, his fortune to back it. Part 2. The Italy trip was supposed to be 2 weeks of solitude. It stretched into a month. I wandered cobblestone streets in Florence, sat in quiet piazzas with espresso, and let the weight of the inheritance settle not as a burden, but as possibility. Papa Joe's voice followed me everywhere. Don't let the money own you, Lena. You own it. I visited small villages where he had traced our family roots decades ago, and for the first time since his death, I felt anchored rather than adrift. Mark called every few days. At first the conversations were tense, laced with the residue of our fight. The family's asking about you, he'd say. Then softer, I miss you. Come home when you're ready. I missed him too, the version of him I fell in love with, the one who once chose me over their expectations. But distance gave me clarity. I wasn't running away, I was recalibrating. When I finally flew back, the knocks had evolved. They weren't just polite anymore. They were strategic. Vivian hosted a welcome home dinner. The table groaned under her chef's creations, and every seat was filled with Harringtons and extended relatives I barely recognized. Claire's husband, James, sat across from me, his smile too wide. Elena, that foundation you started is impressive. Really forward-thinking. We were talking, perhaps a corporate partnership with the firm? Aligning missions, tax benefits, the whole package. Richard raised his glass. To family legacy. Elena, you're part of it now. I smiled and clinked, but my words were measured. The foundation is about Papa Joe's values. Education, opportunity for those who work hard. Not corporate synergies. The temperature in the room dropped a degree. Vivian's pearls clicked as she tilted her head. Of course, dear. But surely you see the benefit of keeping it in the family? Mark has brilliant ideas for expansion. Mark shifted beside me, his hand finding mine under the table. I squeezed back, but not in agreement. Later that night, in the car ride home, he exhaled heavily. They're trying, Elena. Can't you throw them a bone? James really is struggling. A bone? I turned to him, streetlights flashing across his face. Or a few 100,000? I've given bones for years, my time, my patience, my silence. Where was their generosity when I was planning our wedding on a shoestring and Vivian suggested we scale back because it wasn't appropriate for their circle? He had no answer. The counseling sessions were helping him see the pattern, but breaking it was harder. Old loyalties ran deep. The pressure intensified in subtler ways. My email filled with proposals, investment opportunities guaranteed by the family firm, invitations to join boards where my presence would lend credibility, even a suggestion from Claire that I fund a wing at their private school in the twins' names. It would mean the world to them, she texted, attaching photos of the children holding handmade cards that said, "We love Aunt Elena." I funded a different school instead, one in my mother's hometown, for kids who needed it most. The local news covered the ribbon cutting. My mother stood beside me, beaming. Mark flew in for it, proud. The Harringtons sent a large bouquet and a note, asterisk so thoughtful. Let's discuss aligning our philanthropy asterisk. Then came the ultimatum disguised as concern. Richard invited me to lunch at the club, just the two of us. Over aged scotch he didn't touch, he laid it out. Elena, Mark is my son. His future is tied to the firm. Your inheritance could secure generations. But if you keep operating independently, it creates divisions. We need to formalize this. A family trust. Shared decision-making. I stirred my drink slowly. Shared? Or your control? His jaw tightened. You're smart enough to know money this size needs professional management. Ours. I have professionals. Independent ones. I met his eyes. And I know what Papa Joe wanted. Freedom. Not another set of chains. He leaned back, the charm evaporating. Mark loves you. But love needs stability. Think about what happens if this independence strains things beyond repair. It was a threat wrapped in fatherly advice. I left the lunch early, heart pounding. That evening I told Mark everything. He listened, then surprised me. Dad crossed a line. I'll talk to him. Progress. Small, but real. Yet the family didn't stop. They turned to Mark directly. Vivian took him to breakfasts. Claire sent him articles about blended family finances. Richard dangled a major promotion contingent on unified assets. Mark came home one night exhausted, loosening his tie. They're relentless. But I told them no. It's your money, your call. For a moment, hope flickered. We made love like we used to, urgent, reconnecting. He whispered apologies for years of blindness. I believed him. Then the lawsuit threat arrived. It was veiled at first. A letter from the family attorney suggesting mediation over potential claims regarding marital assets and undue influence on Mark's career. I laughed when I read it, then hired my own powerhouse lawyer, Ms. Delgado, a no-nonsense woman who had built her reputation protecting high-net-worth women. Classic move, she said over Zoom. They're testing boundaries. We pushed back hard. I pushed. Publicly, I remained gracious. Privately, I restructured more of the inheritance into irrevocable trusts for causes Papa Joe loved and for my mother's security. I started a quiet project renovating the old factory site into a community hub, workforce training, childcare, small business incubators. The groundbreaking ceremony was intimate. Mark attended. A few local Harrington acquaintances showed up, sniffing for openings. Claire cornered me afterward, her perfume sharp. This is all very noble, Elena, but you're isolating yourself. And Mark. Do you want to be the woman who broke a family apart over pride? Pride? I kept my voice low, aware of the cameras. No, Claire. This is about respect I earned the hard way. The respect you never gave until the balance sheet changed. She stormed off. That night Mark received a barrage of texts from his mother. He showed them to me, accusations that I was turning him against his blood, that my money had changed me into someone unrecognizable. He deleted them. I'm done making excuses for them. Counseling deepened. We unpacked years of resentment. I cried for the miscarriages, the lonely holidays, the version of myself I had dimmed to fit their mold. Mark confronted his own complicity, how easy it had been to let his family's approval guide him. I chose you once, he said. I need to keep choosing you. Winter brought a fragile peace. We spent Christmas with my mother, simple, warm, filled with laughter and Papa Joe stories. The Harringtons sent passive-aggressive gifts and a video message from the twins. We visited them briefly on New Year's, but the air was thick. Vivian hugged me too tightly. We missed the old Elena. The one who tried. I'm still trying, I replied. Trying to be seen for who I am, not what I have. The real storm hit in February. James's startup collapsed spectacularly. Creditors circled. Claire showed up at our door in tears, real ones this time. He's ruined us, Elena. The house, the kids' school. Please. As family. Mark looked torn. I felt the old pull, the desire to smooth things over, to be the good wife. But Papa Joe's steel held. I'll help with financial counseling and job placement resources through the foundation, I said gently. But outright funding the same mistakes? No. Claire's face twisted. You bitch. After everything we welcomed you into. Welcomed? The word burst out. You tolerated me. Now you resent that I won't be used. Mark stepped between us. Enough. Claire, go home. We'll figure out something else. She left, slamming the door. The family group chat exploded. Accusations flew. I was painted as cold, greedy, manipulative. Mark defended me publicly in a rare stand, posting a simple message on his socials about supporting my foundation work and respecting boundaries. It was small, but seismic in their world. Richard called a family summit. We declined. Instead, I took Mark on a trip to the cottage near my mother. We walked snowy trails, talked futures. He admitted considering the promotion strings but ultimately turning them down. I don't want their version of success if it costs us ours. Spring arrived with new growth. The foundation flourished, first cohort of trainees graduated, stories of transformed lives pouring in. I expanded it further. Media profiles followed, heiress honors grandfather with community revival. The Harringtons watched from afar, their invitations now sparse and formal. One quiet evening, Vivian came alone. No entourage. She sat on our porch, looking older under the soft lights. I was wrong, she said simply. About you. About how we treated you. It took losing Mark's trust to see it. I waited. We're not perfect. Old money comes with old habits, protecting what we have, fearing dilution. But you've shown strength. Maybe, we can start over. Real respect this time. It wasn't a full apology. Matriarchs like Vivian rarely gave those. But it was acknowledgement. I offered tea. We talked, carefully, about the foundation, about Mark's career shift toward more independent consulting. She didn't push for money. Not once. Progress wasn't linear. Claire remained distant, bitter. Richard grumbled but eventually invited us to a neutral dinner. James found work through one of the foundation's partners, an irony he never fully appreciated. Mark and I continued counseling, rebuilding on firmer ground. We explored surrogacy options seriously, dreaming of children who would know both sides of their heritage without the shadows. Papa Joe's fortune didn't fix everything. It amplified truths. It forced choices. The family still knocked sometimes, holidays, milestones, but the door opened on my terms now. I was no longer the ignored wife at the end of the table. I was Elena Voss Harrington, steward of a legacy built on grit, not just gold. Some nights I still sat with the old photos, tracing Papa Joe's smile. "You were right," I whispered. "Character is everything." And with money or without, I finally knew mine. The knocks would come and go. But I answered them whole, heart, steel, and fortune aligned. And that's how $42 million showed me exactly who my husband's family really was. Money doesn't change people, it reveals them. I finally learned to stand in my power and set boundaries with the people who only showed up when it benefited them. What would you have done in my situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and hit the bell. I'll be sharing more real-life drama soon. Thanks for watching, and remember, never let anyone make you feel small.